6 o'clock, I'd like to call to order the Clive City Council meeting for June 9th, 2022. Would the clerk please call roll?
Mayor Edwards.
Here.
Council members Klein,
Here.
McCoy,
Here.
Judkins,
Here.
Weaver,
Here.
Lanani.
Here.
You.
If you all would rise and join me with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is approval of the agenda. I am not aware of any changes.
Move approval.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The agenda is approved. Next is our citizen presentation. This gives citizens the opportunity to approach the council on an item that is not on the agenda. And while we wait to see if anyone in the council has such a presentation, we'll ask Pete to check online to see if anyone wishes to speak to the council.
Mayor, at this time, we just have staff and council members online.
Thank you, Pete. And as a reminder, Clive supports the pillars of character counts, endeavoring at all times to promote and model the principles of trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. So in all of our work, we expect everyone here to act in a respectful manner consistent with these principles. Our next item would be our consent items, requires a resolution.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve consent items. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post that vote?
I don't have the packet link. If you could send it to me, please, but I would be yes.
So with that, the consent items are approved by a vote of 5-0. Next, we have a presentation with new personnel in the fire department. Rick.
Mayor and council, it's my privilege to introduce you tonight to Abby Meese. She's going to join us on June 20th as a new administrative assistant as Linda prepares for retirement. So Abby comes to us with over 20 years of experience as office clerk and inside sales with a couple of different companies, Rebirth Products and Herman Welding, previous member of the Truro City Council, and been part of the Truro Betterment Committee and on the Truro Fire and Rescue Association. So we're very excited about Abby starting and look forward to getting her up to speed.
Welcome, Abby. We're glad you're here. Anything from the council?
Welcome.
Okay.
Do you want to say a few words?
Just a pleasure to meet all of you guys, and I'm excited to come aboard.
Well, if you have any tips on city council, be sure to.
Yeah, small town, nothing like this.
All right, welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Next, we'll move into our action items. First item we have is a public hearing on fireworks. Did we publish the appropriate public notice?
Yes, Your Honor, it was published in the Des Moines Register on May 27th, 2022.
Very good. And
Good
Amanda?
evening, Mayor, Council. I'm joining you on Zoom tonight. Can everyone hear me okay in the chambers?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So the amendment before you tonight to the zoning ordinance is the result of a new legislation passed by the Iowa legislature this session, which impacts cities' ability to regulate the sale of consumer fireworks in any commercial or industrial zoned districts. So we have to amend Chapter 11, which is the zoning ordinance, to be in compliance with that new legislation. Currently, our code only allows those sales in the M1 and M2 industrial zoning districts. So with this proposed amendment before you tonight, we are simply just adding a P next to consumer fireworks sales in the C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, TC1, TC3, and TC4 zoning districts. So this will just allow those sales in any commercial or industrial property throughout the city. Legal did advise that we are still able to enforce the flood regulations within the zoning ordinance that would limit the storage of any of those flammable firework type hazardous materials to be 1 foot above the 500-year base flood elevation. So we intend to continue enforcing those requirements for life safety purposes. The
Thank you,
Planning and
Amanda.
Zoning Commission did recommend approval. So with that, I would take any questions.
Questions from the council?
Amanda, real quick. So this is essentially mandated by the state government then that we have to relax these zoning restrictions on fireworks sales. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Matt?
Your Honor, just wanted to report, to date, we haven't received any new applications from what we typically have received for Class 1, Class 2 fireworks at this point. And with this being a state law that's already in place, actually enacted by the governor, staff would recommend that the council waive all the readings tonight, proceed to third on approval of this ordinance change.
Before we entertain a motion to close the public hearing, is there anyone here tonight who wants to address the council on the fireworks issue? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close public hearing.
Second.
Motion and a second to close public hearing. Further discussion? Seeing
Mayor,
none?
Mayor,
Yeah,
can I-
oh, go ahead, Ted.
Sorry, can I ask just a quick question for Amanda?
Sure.
Are there any, is there any ability to put any restrictions or limitations where commercial is adjacent to residential areas?
I believe we could still apply our typical buffer and separation requirements that we look at when we do any temporary site plan. Any of these sales that would take place outside in like the tents or pop-up type environments would still go through that temporary site plan approval process. So we make sure that, accessibility and emergency vehicles can get through the site, and it's not, no dumpsters right next to someone's backyard or anything like that throughout that process. So we would still have that ability. We just can't limit which districts those are located in.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks, Amanda.
Any other questions? Michael?
Amanda, I want to go a little further on that one, Ted's questions, just for simple minds like mine, as an example. Let's use the Central Iowa Coins, right? A commercial property adjacent to an apartment.
Mhm.
They can go there?
Yes, that would be zoned for the commercial use. They could locate there. And I believe they would be able to locate on that site in such a way that those safety considerations were met for the flood and kind of the like emergency vehicle access stuff that we
That's
can look at.
insane. I'm sorry, that's crazy.
Out of our hands.
Yeah, but that's,
That's for Class 1 and Class 2.
but I would be for restricting them as much as possible in situations like that and others, right? There are a lot of places that are adjacent to residential that you have a problem like we did on Hickman, and that's not contained as it was. We got big problems, and I get it, it's out of our hands, and the legislators did it with blinders on, but we'll see how it goes the next 5 years, right? Or so.
Well, that's why I asked the question, but I mean, it sounds like, Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is through the site planning process, we may be able to have some buffer there to help protect against that. Is that accurate?
We would mostly be able to regulate like where on the property things are placed. Not really anything that would come into play during a fire like we had last year.
Well, begrudgingly, I'd move that
already-
I'm sorry.
With the vote to close.
Yes.
We have to close the
Got
public
it.
hearing. So if the council could vote on closing the public hearing. And then would the clerk please post that vote? That passes by a vote of 5-0. Our next action would be to suspend the rules.
I'd move that the rule requiring that an ordinance be considered and voted on for passage at 2 council meetings prior to the meeting be suspended in respect to ordinance 1120.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote? 4 votes are required.
be fun. I have a question, Mayor. I'm sorry, but what, can I?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want there, council member. But you're
If I
voting-
vote against
you're voting to
this,
suspend the rules.
yeah, I know, but if I vote against it, right, it holds the process up.
It does.
But nothing we can do anyways. Legally, we have to do this.
Yes, our hands are tied.
Okay.
And again, at this point, we're just trying to suspend the
I
rule.
get it, but to get to the vote, then we have to vote, and I could stop it now. It's not suspended.
We have 5 votes to suspend the rules. Next action would be to address the ordinance itself.
Move that ordinance number 1120 be considered, placed upon its passage, and adopted.
A motion and a second on ordinance 1120. Further discussion? Any further comments?
Let me ask a quick question, Mayor.
Go ahead, Ted.
Because I feel Mike's frustration and I'm with him on that. And maybe this is a question for council. What happens if we vote no? I'm just curious what the process, what would happen?
If you vote no tonight, it'd be the first, well, it'd be all 3 considerations, right?
Yes.
So hypothetically, an applicant who wants to sell fireworks in a C1 district would come to the city tomorrow and file a permit to sell. And the city would either choose to enforce the city ordinance and refuse that permit, or they would violate the city ordinance and follow the state law and issue the permit. If we chose not to issue the permit consistent with state law, then a member would file a lawsuit against the city of Clive for illegal action, which would be a proper position because our law would be in direct conflict with the state law, and the state law would trump on this particular situation.
So it opens up the city litigation then, correct?
It does.
Possibly, right? But not if we vote against it out of principle. I'm all, whatever, fireworks, it's past deal, right? We can do fireworks, that's fine. Last year, okay. But to get closer to residential properties and the harm it can inflict, I'm totally against. And it doesn't mean that the city does not have to give the permits out as we did last year. And if it's the same people in the same locations, no problem. Right?
I suppose there is an alternative argument to be made, if I may, to just open up both sides of the argument. One might also argue that the state law is unconstitutional because it violates the home rule and the city's regulating health and safety in their communities. That would be a potential alternative position someone might take to defend the city not issuing a permit, for example. I'm sure there's a whole host of other arguments out there, but off the cuff, those are a couple I might suggest on both sides of the issues. If the council,
Would you
Go
like
ahead.
to speculate on probable success of not following state law?
well, I think you would have a very difficult time winning that argument.
But can
I think
we,
the prudent approach is to follow the state law and to amend our code, but that is the risk for this council to consider.
so, and
Unfortunately,
I get that, council, and I agree with you. I guess what I'm wondering is there some kind of balance here that we can strike where we pass the ordinance, but we put in place some administrative rules, for lack of a better term, that, you know, we see through like federal agencies, they put in place administrative rules on vague laws. Can we do that same type of process through the site planning, where we internally require that they be, you know, let Amanda determine what that distance is, but however far away from a residential area for safety purposes? Can we do that?
Unfortunately, without having some specifics in front of me, I'm going to answer no. The state law completely preempts the field for you to regulate or control anything in a C1, C2, C3, et cetera, district. That's what the state law did. They took away the ability to regulate in that space, except for flood control, because that's a federal law, right? And federal would trump the state law in that situation. So unfortunately,
without site amendment restrictions that Amanda mentioned, yes, those are still in place as far as buffers and those sorts of things that are already in the code. But completely regulating in that space has been removed from this council and this jurisdiction. It's the state that has now taken that away from you and regulating, saying you cannot regulate and cannot restrict fireworks sales in these districts.
You know, based upon previous legislation right there, oftentimes what it takes is a serious accident to have, and a lot of bad public press for lawmakers to have to go back and relook that and make those modifications. That's unfortunate that it has to do that, but you know, I've seen that happen in the past too.
And until then, our name is on this vote.
Right.
Matt?
And one thing that we can do at a staff level too is, you know, pending your vote tonight, give the council a little bit of an understanding from staff's perspective on the temporary site plan. You know, what authorities do we have? Of course, we can give maybe a few examples and follow up with the council with some information on what we can do with that temporary site plan process. It's not, again, I agree with council. It's not going to do much, but at least it's something that's within your control in terms of buffering and what we can do there. We can follow up with the council on that.
So one more course of action that might be appropriate is to move to table this vote to the next meeting until you have some of that visualization of what that site plan might look like. That is an option.
Move to table this vote until next meeting.
Well, if I may, you actually have a motion and a second right now. You need to either vote that up or down first. Don't we have a motion and a second?
Yeah.
Did we have a
Pending?
second?
Oh, you might not have a second. I did a motion, but you may
Wait,
not have.
I second it.
I have a motion and a second pending to approve the ordinance 1120. That would need to be voted down
Unless those making the motion.
unless those that make the motion would like to amend their motion or accept a friendly amendment.
Or withdraw
Thank you. Or withdraw their motion.
their motion.
It can't hurt, right? So another 2 weeks or whatever without it being on the quote books. But 1 week.
I would disagree. We're already in violation of state law as we sit here right now. And from your city manager's perspective, I would advise you to move forward in conformance with state law and let us present you what options you have. Because we're already currently not in conformance with state law and the governor's already signed the bill, so it's been enrolled.
How likely are we to actually see that violation, you know, be challenged? Because we're not hitting fireworks season yet is what I'm thinking.
Actually, we are,
We are.
Councilmember, that began on June 1st.
We've already started receiving applications.
And I
Okay.
think it's the newest councilman goes to jail if we're in violation. Oh,
For
I'm
the record.
okay. All right. Look,
As distasteful as it is, as unhappy as we are with the legislation, really, our hands are tied. You know, we took an oath to uphold the constitutions of both United States and Iowa. We're obligated to follow the law, whether we like it or not.
there you go, Mayor.
So I've got a motion and a second to consider ordinance number 1120. Is there further
Suspend
discussion?
the rules, right?
Call the question.
I'm sorry, Ted, what did you say?
Isn't it to suspend the rules?
No, we've suspended the rules. We've already done that.
I'm moving the ordinance now, Ted.
Yeah, so now we're on to the ordinance. We've got a motion and a second to approve the ordinance. And so is there any further hesitance on voting? Yes. Okay, all right. Seeing no further discussion or objections, would the council please vote on ordinance number 1120? And then would the clerk please post the vote?
I didn't get a pop-up for the vote, but I will vote yes.
Thank you.
The ordinance passes by a vote of 5-0. Ordinance number 1120 is declared to have been enacted. Thank you. Next item we have is listed as second consideration of ordinance number 1121 on Shadow Creek West rezoning.
No. Number two.
Number two.
Oh,
Flood control. Mayor.
sorry. Moving along too quickly. Did we publish the appropriate public notice on our flood control amendment?
Yes, Your Honor, it was published in the Des Moines Register on June 1st, 2022.
And the action I think we're asked to take on this one tonight, now that the public hearing is open, is to continue it until July the 14th.
Move to continue the public hearing until July 14th on the zoning ordinance amending regarding flood control.
Second.
Motion is second. Further discussion? If not, would council please vote on continuing this public hearing?
Now, Your Honor, if I could, just for the benefit of the record, council is wanting to see the result of the discussions of the Planning and Zoning Commission. They have not made a recommendation yet regarding this. Their next meeting will be the first week of July, July 7th, I believe. And so this, by this action, the public hearing will continue until the council meeting following that Plan and Zoning Commission meeting.
Thank you. And again, we had no motion to close because we continued. All right, now let's move on to ordinance 1121 on Shadow Creek West rezoning.
Your Honor,
Oh.
we'll still need to table the first consideration of the ordinance to July.
Move to table ordinance 1122 until the July 14th meeting.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion to table. Further discussion? If not, would council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? And the motion to table passes by a vote of 5-0. Third time's charm. Now let's take a look at ordinance number 1121. Amanda.
Thank you, Mayor. This is also not going to be a very exciting one tonight, as we are recommending that we postpone the second consideration of this until the June 23rd council meeting. As I had presented at the last council meeting, the developer is looking at doing something a little bit different in the Shadow Creek West development. So we brought forward some of those ideas to you to get y'all's feedback. And with that, now we need a little bit more time to work through some details with the developer before we're ready to bring that second consideration forward to you. We like to try to have the zoning change and development agreement pretty much ironed out at that point, so there are no surprises that come up at the third consideration. So with that, we would recommend postponing this vote until the June 23rd council meeting.
And let's check with legal counsel. Is that a deferral is the language we need or table?
Motion to continue or table is fine.
Thank you.
The most important thing is to state which date you will reconsider it.
Okay. So we need a motion.
Motion to table.
Become makes a motion to table to June 23rd. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to table that until our June 23rd meeting. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? That passes by a vote of 5-0. Next item, we're moving on to animal protection and control, and this would be ordinance 1123. Lieutenant.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Happy to be back here to talk about community cats again. As you recall at the last meeting, we brought the ordinance to you. You approved that reading. So for the second reading tonight, there's been no comment from the public to this point. And we are requesting waiving the second reading, move straight to the third for adoption.
All right,
Taking
questions for
questions.
Lieutenant? If not, we'll need a motion to waive the rules.
I move that the rule requiring that an ordinance be considered and voted on for passage at 2 council meetings prior to this meeting be suspended with respect to ordinance number 1123.
Second.
And we have a second. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? This is a motion to suspend the rules. Okay, we've suspended the rules by a vote of 5-0. Next, we need to move on to the third and final reading.
Move that ordinance number 1123 be considered, placed upon its passage and adopted.
Second.
Motion and a second on the final reading. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote?
Susan.
And that passes by a vote of 5-0. Ordinance number 1123 is declared to have been enacted. All right, next, Richard, you're up to tell us about the library strategic plan.
Mayor, members of the council, thanks for having me tonight to talk about the first of two library items we have here. The first one I'll start off with is the strategic plan for the library. This is the new updated strategic plan for the library. We're very excited to have this in front of you and kind of show you the results of the work that we've done with Rethinking Libraries, LLC. They're the organization that the city hired to help us kind of lead through this process. Since November, when we started this process, we've done a lot of different things, from working with them to get them data about our circulation, what circulates, what doesn't, talk to different groups of people, from current users to people that don't use the library. I believe several council members and the city manager sat down with the focus group with Rethinking Libraries. We also did an online questionnaire. We got tons of data points that kind of led us through this process to the point where we are tonight. First place I'll start is updated mission and vision and values. So I won't read through everything we have on the page in front of us, but really wanted to find ways to talk about what the library means to the community and what we're trying to accomplish. So with the mission, looking at, we're building community through opportunities and experiences. One of the things that I know the library board struggled a lot with, staff struggled with, is do you actually need to have the word library in there? And really came to the point is no, because all these things kind of represent what the library does, and we're really building that community. We're offering opportunities and experiences. You can do that anywhere. It just happens to happen in the library. And then a new vision, connecting the community, creating opportunities, and rediscovering fun. You know, being the leisure services department with Parks and Rec and the library together, we really felt that was important to talk about what we do, because much of what we do helps people live a higher quality of life. They have fun. And so that was really important to us. And then finally, the values there: welcoming, service-oriented, flexibility. You know, we want to make sure with the flexibility is how do we adapt to changing environments. The COVID pandemic is a great one. We had to change on the fly on how we continue to offer services to the community without having the library building open. Diversity, equity, inclusion. We want to make sure that the library is a welcoming space. And then finally, accessibility. We want to ensure that we are available to the entire community. This is a great way the Harbach Center helps us do that. We're taking library services over to that community. And we're already seeing a benefit of that, because there's people that have come in the library, they didn't have library cards, they said they can't usually get over to the library here, and now we're bringing the service to them. So we're making it more accessible to the community. So we really felt those values were really important, and the library board is really, really excited about that as well. The next thing we did is kind of break this down into 4 strategic focus areas. So these are kind of the 4 big goals that we want to be looking for when we do this. And each one goes a little bit deeper, but the first one is improving the physical library and make it more inviting inside and out. So what do we do with this current facility in a way that makes it more inviting? Do we adjust some things? Do we add a fresh coat of paint? Some of the things like that. Then we want to expand services both inside and outside of the current library. The Harbach Center is a great thing for that. We've also been taking story times out to parks. We've also been doing a lot of different programming in some of our parks. How do we get outside this traditional building and get people engaged in what we offer? We want to continue to elevate community awareness and engagement. There's a lot of people that have library cards, but there's also a lot of people that don't. So how do we elevate this awareness of what the library is and what you can get from that? And how do we engage those people? And then finally, how do we make the library and its services easier to use and more efficient? So how do we tap into emerging technology, social media, different types of programming to get people engaged. One of the things we're learning is text services might be a way to engage more people in library services versus email or social media. Also to looking at how do we get those programs out to different places. And then I promise I won't read this, but how do we take each one of those focus areas? How do we look at different investment options? And what is the goal we want to accomplish with that? So you can see a lot of that was broken down in what are some ideas we can spend money on or allocate staff time to accomplish those types of things. And then that was broken down even more into outcomes. What would we want to get from some of that investment, either in time or in allocation of improvements or programming? And then what are some of the potential initiatives that we would try to tackle to get to that point and accomplish this strategic plan? So each one of these, the four goal areas has each one of these. And then what we'll do over the next couple, 2 to 3 years, we'll work with you, the council and the library board as part of the strategic planning every year, as well as the budget process to ask and kind of prioritize a lot of these initiatives to help us accomplish these goals. So this is kind of our framework, but then we'll continue to work with the library board and you, the council, through this whole process to continue to implement these things and prioritize what's the most important throughout the library. So without any specific questions, this is kind of the overview.
Questions for Richard? Go ahead, Eric.
Richards, we kind of talked about the future of libraries, and it goes all the way back to this council since 2008. We looked at adding an additional library. I think the focus has been is, what is the future of the libraries and how can we incorporate some of these ideas, which I think are great, into community involvement as the libraries evolve from just kind of a bricks and mortar showcase of books has become far, far more right here. I really like this plan. I looked through it and you know, again, it's taking that our library, the Clive Library, to the next level.
Yep.
And I think this does a good job with that.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really happy with the work that Rethinking Libraries did for us.
Other questions or comments? I think what we're asked to do this evening is to receive.
Move to receive and file the library strategic plan.
Second.
And we have a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And would clerk please post that vote? Great job, Richard.
Yeah, good work, heavy lift. It was a lot.
And that passes by a vote of 5-0. All right, let's talk about waiving fines.
All right, this next item is a follow-up from the budgeting presentation in January regarding eliminating fines on most material checkouts of the library. One of the things that was discussed at that time was turning this into a pilot program that we could evaluate and wanting to have some different metrics on how we'd evaluate that. So what we have before you tonight is our recommended metrics that would be used to evaluate this pilot program. They are monthly card signups. One of the things we easily have is how many people sign up for cards each month. We can really track that. Door counts, we have door counters here at the main library as well as the Harback Center, so we can kind of tackle how many people are coming in each month and how many people come in previous month. Monthly circulations, patrons billed by month, and average days to fill a hold. We think those kind of metrics provide the best kind of flexibility to track how people are responding to this. Are more people coming in? Are they checking out more materials? Are we having longer waits for materials because we eliminated fines? We think those are probably the best materials for that. We're also recommending a pilot program that would extend for 18 months from July 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2023. The reason for that timing is, should we get to the end of that pilot period, that still gives us the ability to work on the budget, any budget amendments according to that. So that's kind of the reason for the 18-month period. In addition to that, we'd also recommend a 6-month amnesty period, that any outstanding materials that people have that been billed for, they could bring them in from July 1st of this year to December 31st of this year. And if they bring that material back, we'll waive all those outstanding fines. So trying to find a way to get a lot of these materials back that maybe people have in their houses. So that's really the kind of key points of that. In terms of libraries that are going fine-free, we are starting to see more and more of those in the metro area here. Waukee just went fine-free, I believe, on May 10th. Johnston and Grimes and Des Moines are all fine-free, so we're seeing a larger trend of that. In addition, nationwide, there's been enough programs that have gone fine-free that we can at least get some benchmarks from them, and they've all seen increases in material circulation as well as reduction in lost materials. So we think it's an effective way that we can really increase circulation, reduce loss, and in some ways cut staff time that we use to kind of track people down over fines. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions, Susan?
Thank you. I'd like to know how you will manage those that have a hold on an item to encourage that to come in without using a fine.
Yeah, so one of the things is if we have a list of hold or people on hold for an item, then the person that has that item cannot renew them. And then once those items become 1 day overdue, then their account will be shut off. That's one of the triggers we want to use. As soon as your item's overdue, you can't check any more materials out until you bring that item back. Also, too, we want to see is, are we getting a longer list of fines? That's one of the metrics we'll look at to see is the days that we're having people on hold increasing 2, 3, 4 days, or where are they at? One of the things we might look at that case, if we are getting more holds, then maybe we purchase additional book for that, some of those very, very popular titles. But we believe the shutting the account off as soon as they're overdue, not having a renewal for items that are on hold will be significant or enough to get people to bring those materials back.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Eric?
Richard, you estimate that the budgetary impact result in a reduction of $15,000 per year in the library budget. Can you talk a little more about that and the impact on the library?
Yeah, so that's approximately what we collect each year in fines. In total, between fines and fees, we collect about $20,000, and the fine impact is about $15,000. One of the things we asked is for a reduction in the amount of revenue that we'd bring in, so more operating support as part of that. But we've also committed to finding ways to bring in more revenue, potentially through book sales. One of the things we're going to do is do a larger book sale over at Harbach this summer. I believe it's this summer or this fall. I'm not sure the exact date on that. Try to find ways to bring in a little bit more revenue. We're looking at grant opportunities to see if there's ways to kind of fill some of those holes on those type of things to kind of stabilize that budget in that area.
The second part of it is you're asking us to essentially forgive almost $250,000.
Yeah.
It's pretty heavy lift.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, one thing I do want to point out regarding that is from when the library opened back in 2002. So that's 20 years of accumulated fines, fees, overdue, and lost materials that have not been paid. We do ask the council to write down a little bit of that every year. We do think that we'll get some of that back and materials returned. So yeah, absolutely. It's a big number. I fully realize that. And it's most likely not, if we still try to get all that money, we're not going to realize probably even half of that money, even if we went to pursue it through collections and some other avenues as well.
What kind of mechanism do you have to track that? Just, and I certainly understand we're not going to get all that back.
Yeah.
20 years ago, but
yeah. So
what kind of mechanism do you have to track that?
So what we can do, there's a couple different things. We can freeze that number, say July 1st, and say at this point, we have this many outstanding items. And then what we can do, any materials bought back, we can drop that off along with the fines they have. And then we'll still have a number at December 31st that we'll have to make a decision on. Does the council want us to continue to pursue that? Or do you want to write down what's left at that point? So we'll have be another decision point at some point after we get all those materials left, what's left out of that. And at that point, our expectation would be if they want to get their account restored, they would pay their fees and fines.
Michael?
Yeah, I've got several questions. Today, if I'm late or I'm holding a book at home, what happens to my account?
So you will start to accrue fines until you reach the $5 point. And at that point, your account would be shut off. Then you would be sent notices at 7, 14, 21. If you haven't brought those materials back, we'll send you a letter saying that we're going to send this collection and you owe this much because we're assuming that these items are lost or stolen.
And then in this case, if I am 1 day late, you'll shut off my account.
We'll shut off your account until you bring the material back. At that point, your library privileges are restored as soon as that gets dropped in the Dropbox and we check it
It
in.
just seems counter to me when one of the arguments is that we want to bring more patrons in, right?
Mhm.
Get more people to sign up as one of our metrics.
Mhm.
If I'm one day late, my account gets shut off and I'm done coming back. Because if
Mhm.
I'm not going to pay my fines anyways,
Mhm.
or care about bringing back the material, why would I bring it back? I'm getting cut off at $5. Who cares? And then they never come back, right? And
It's absolutely possible.
so
Yeah.
we'd be interesting. I'm a little nervous on an 18-month pilot, but
Mhm.
has it been figured in on how much material we'll lose over this period of time? So we're talking $15,000 in fines, but how many thousands in DVDs, books, audiobooks?
Mhm.
Or, yeah, the ones that are being, no fines, no longer charge fines, traditional library material, books, DVDs, and audiobooks.
Yeah.
Because once they're gone, we pay for that.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. There's nothing to know exactly what that number is going to be. We can only use some of the experience we've seen from doing the research on what other systems have seen, as well as what other kind of guesses are. We think we'll actually see probably a reduction of materials lost. Anecdotally, some of the things we heard through the strategic plan process was, oh, I know I have those fines, but I'm kind of embarrassed. I'm just not going to go back and keep the materials. And we've heard people say that, like, if there wasn't the fines, that they probably just drop it off and move on and recheck out more materials. It's all anecdotal at this point and guesses, but that's why the pilot program is probably a good way to approach that it's not a permanent thing and we can evaluate it to see where we're at. But all the research we've been able to do and all the kind of people we've been able to talk to tells us that actually we'll have a reduction in the materials lost.
But you have places like Chicago, New York, Dallas, Knoxville, Dubuque, that have over the 18 months experience in this. What is their data to show how much material they're losing?
They're losing less material. That's the data that's the only data we're able to come up with. They're losing less materials as part of a fine-free program. Because sometimes people get in that mindset is like, oh, it's already late. I've already incurred the fine. I paid for it. I'm just keeping it rather than take it back. Whereas they're not incurring a fine, then, okay, I'll bring it back and I'll get my privileges back.
There's someone that's paid many fines. The Clive Library.
I have no idea.
My family members. I'm certainly one that
Just your family?
Just my family. I'm certainly one that look at the pilot program. And look at it. There's an opportunity here to reduce losses and increase circulation. I think it's a good shot to take.
So are you moving the resolution, Eric?
I am.
We have a second.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Further discussion.
I just have one comment, and that is,
Ted's got one.
oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I would encourage consideration of maybe not just shutting it up after one day, but having a little bit more of a grace period in there, because I don't know how difficult it is to get it turned back on, but I could see that being a little bit smoother for people.
One thing I can tell you is that actually has been a discussion at the library board level. What's the appropriate amount of days? Following this action tonight, whether way it goes, then we'll have to amend the circulation policy to kind of set that exact thing. And some of the preliminary discussions that we've had with the board are anywhere from 1 to 5. We've said 1, we think, but certainly we can take into account any feedback we get tonight. And then when we take that forward to the library board, set on a date, but it'd probably be no more than 4 or 5 days at the very max.
Well, Susan, I imagine you're thinking of a scenario where someone is overdue with a book and then they're cut off from electronic and all access, right?
Right.
Yep.
And so
I am, and I've kind of been in that situation if I was traveling and couldn't get something back, or they're just, sometimes there's a reason. So
one of the things we've also actually kind of to address that we've been exploring with the library board, automatic renewals. So if there's not a hold on the book, that the book in the system would automatically renew. So we have been exploring things like that up to the maximum amount of renewals that you can get for a material. So that's one of the things that we've been exploring with the library board as well.
So Rich, you can do extensions, renewals
Mhm.
online too. so-
Yep.
Ted,
Yeah, thanks. I had a number of similar questions that others had, so I won't repeat them. I've expressed my reservations to Richard about this. I'm very skeptical, but I'm also, open to that. I may be wrong. So I'm open to that, which is why I'm willing to look at the pilot. But Richard, just a couple clarifying things.
Yeah.
So this is a one strike and you're out, right? So you have one book and it's at this point, 1 day overdue. Maybe we create a grace period of whatever, 5 days or whatever.
Yeah.
But at this point, it's just, if it's one book, your account's suspended. Is that accurate?
Yes, if you have an item overdue, you may have 10 items checked out. We're not going to be knocking on your door and say you got to give them to us. But you just wouldn't be able to do any more material checkout until the overdue item was returned.
And is there any kind of aggregation where we have just a repeat offender over and over again? That's where, at some point your account's suspended longer? Or is there has there been any conversation about that?
No, we haven't had any conversation about that because we'd still have the fees in effect, so that if someone took materials, they kept them past overdue to the point where they go to collections, then we would still recoup the cost of the material from that standpoint. Certainly we would, if we saw a serial offender like that, we would probably try to grab them and have a conversation with them and see if there's a way that we can work with them to get them in a little bit more timely, especially if they're materials that are popular and we have a waiting list for.
Figuratively speaking, Mayor, grab them.
I heard those terms. And I saw the lieutenant's eyes, and council eyes.
It was all over.
I have a similar concern to what Susan brought up as far as, our inventory is limited. And you can get waiting lists for certain items. And I maybe checked out a book that I really, really like, and I know there's no fine, so I'm just gonna keep it for 4 months, 5 months. There's no repercussion to that. Maybe I don't need another one because I'm keeping that book for that period of time.
So the recommendation regarding lost and stolen items will still stay the way it is now. So at a 60-day point where you've kept the material, then we would send that off to collections if you haven't returned that material or paid for the cost of it. So that won't change from how the library currently operates.
Okay. Well, one thing that I think is going to be critically important for this is that we have appropriate baseline metrics that we're starting from. That we're measuring. And that would include things like patrons that are on a wait list that have to wait longer because of this policy. Those are things that I'm going to want to know when we're reviewing this at the end of the pilot. So I would like to, if you could provide in advance of this taking effect, what those metrics are so that we have a chance to review them. I would like to see that to make sure that we're tracking things that we really need to be tracking to know whether this is successful or not. I'm going to be honest, I don't trust the research because my belief is that a lot of that research is done by people who go in with the idea that they're supporting this policy. And so they're wanting it to support that the results are going to support that. So I want to see it and how it affects our library. So I think it's really important to have those metrics up front. And an understanding of that. The other question, last question I had, we're saying an 18-month pilot that starts on July 1st of this year, but the policy doesn't actually start until January.
So the differentiation is that we would start on July 1st, but we'd have that amnesty period between July 1st and December 31st of this year. So then once the amnesty period ends for the return materials, then it would fully go into effect on January 1st.
Right, but the actual statistics, at least in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, would not truly be relevant until January 1 because we still have our existing policy in place effective July 1st. I know we're doing this amnesty, but I don't know. To me, that seems like it's skewing the numbers.
Well, what we'll plan to do is do monthly kind of accounting of numbers. And what we could do is work to just provide those numbers monthly, either through a report as part of the leisure services report or part of the city manager's emails to the council, just so we can see how they're going on a monthly type basis to keep the council more informed throughout this whole process.
Okay.
I wanted to add real quick that I concur with Councilmember Judkins' statement about giving a little bit of grace if that's possible. And I do like the idea of auto renewals if there's no hold.
Very good. Thank you.
Other questions? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
To Ted's point, I would like to see that information on a monthly basis, and I think that would put everybody a little bit at ease. And
We can do that.
let's see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? So the motion, resolution to go fine-free passes by a vote of 5-0.
Thank you.
Economic vitality, Matthew.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tonight we have before you a couple actions related to the Economic Vitality Committee that we've been talking about for a number of years, and over the last month, specific actions related to the group. What's before you tonight, those two actions. One is amending a little bit of the language that we had in the original kind of committee statement that the council adopted earlier this year, making some adjustments to the count of the membership on the committee, and then the kind of the targets for the membership in terms of the diversity that we're looking for on that committee. So that's your first action. And then the second action is a motion to consider the mayoral appointments for the initial committee. And in your packet is included 18 members, 2 of those being city council liaisons as the chair and vice chair for the committee. Again, I won't read off all the names, but Mayor Edwards, Councilmember Judkins, and myself met a few weeks ago to work through this list and present that for your consideration in terms of initiating this Economic Vitality Committee, really focused on looking at the Economic Development Action Plan, which hasn't been updated for a number of years, and then targeted on specific items that I know are priorities of the council, like 86th Street Neighborhoods Plan, University Avenue Corridor Plan, and really getting going on an item that I know this council has discussed for a long time and are ready to come to fruition. And with the idea of pending your actions tonight, hopefully this summer, getting an initial meeting going, and probably have some more intense meetings early on, as a lot of context setting will need to be done with the city's planning efforts that have happened over the last number of years on these priority items, and then jumping in and getting some recommendations from these folks in terms of ways that what economic development really means for Clive. So with that, Your Honor, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Matt? Otherwise, what we're looking for is a resolution.
I move the resolution approving amended City of Clive Economic Vitality Committee.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the resolution. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post that vote? That resolution passes by a vote of 5-0. The next item is the motion approving the appointment.
So moved.
Second.
The motion is second to approve the appointments. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And then would the clerk please post that vote? That passes by a vote of 5-0. Next item, we have city manager salary and benefits package on our agenda. Ted was chairing the committee this year, so I'll pass the mic over to Ted.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, so the Personnel Committee met recently to go over Matt's performance review. As you might imagine, it went very well. He scored with a very hefty average of 94, which lands squarely in the excellent range of our matrix. His top 2 areas were, not surprising, financial management and organizational commitment, both at average of 97, so pretty tough to top that. So when you look at our salary matrix, that lands at a 2.25% increase for salary. And then when you add in the cost of living increase of the normal 3% plus the additional 1% this year due to the inflationary environment, it puts us at a 6.25% increase for salary for Matt. So overall, the reviews were really outstanding. I think it shows a validation for Matt and a real level of trust that we have in him and the work that he has done over the last few years, but certainly the last year. And so that speaks very highly of him. And then one last point, his salary with the increase will put him squarely at the median salary point for the comparable cities that we use to compare ourselves against. So he's a couple of those that are above him are those that are long tenured, and then those that are below him are some of relatively new city managers. So he's kind of right there in the middle where is probably appropriate. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Chad. Susan also served on the committee. Susan, do you have anything you want to add?
I would just say that we did have a discussion about the comparable communities and felt that we were comfortable with those for this year, but talked about expanding slightly for the future. So mainly all of the comparable communities were larger than Clive, and there were several that are really approaching Clive and are very fast growing communities, and we felt those are appropriate and also in the metro. So we'll be seeing those added in the future.
Further questions? Michael?
No, I do not. I thought I heard someone else, but I was going to move the resolution.
Well, go ahead.
I move the resolution approving city manager's salary and benefits package.
And we have a motion and a second. Now, further discussion. Anyone else? Hearing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? That passes by a vote of 5-0. Matt, we'll keep you around a little longer. Great job this last year.
Appreciate that, Your Honor.
I enjoyed the first year of Ted Weaver chasing me down rather than the professor.
Yeah, I should get a raise for that.
Edwards didn't for 11 years. You won't get one that's 1 year.
All right. We'll move on to Hickman Interchange Planning Update. Matt.
Your Honor, this is an update that we wanted to provide on the status of the Hickman corridor planning work that we've been doing with the Iowa DOT, the city of Urbandale, and with our consultant Snyder and Associates. So included in the packet, kind of some top themes that we've been discussing. Bike pedestrian facilities has been a very big one. Starting off with is really finding grade separated accessibility for bikes and pedestrians through this interchange, both from east to west, like you see on the screen right now. So this would be grade separated with bridges going over the on and off ramps and a tunnel underneath the interstate on the north side of Hickman Road. This would be on the Urbandale side. So just you've got in history of farms and the hotels to the northeast here, and then Lifetime Fitness to the northwest, Love's Travel Plaza to the southwest, and then City Hall and the car dealerships here to the southeast. So you'd have a grade separated crossing. And then also what was included in the packet, and I'll flip to it here in a second, is also looking for ways to get underneath Hickman to the south to the Greenbelt Trail. So between the two cities, we have kind of a comfort level, at least as the staffs have been discussing it, of looking at that grade separated condition. It does come with some hefty price tags, and I know we have a series of those, over $8 million in total when you look at bike pedestrian, gateway, landscaping aesthetics, and stormwater management. One thing that I wanted to kind of set the context for with all of the costs related to the interchange, that would be city related costs. So that's what we're really focused on tonight. As we started off with the DC trip here last month, is really looking at federal funding opportunities for that $8 million approximate 8 million. That number will probably move around a little bit to be shared between the two cities, looking for federal resources to support a substantial portion, if not all of that. But it's always important to acknowledge that the city would have to serve as the backstop if we're not able to secure that at the point at which the interchange would be under construction. The DOT is really looking at probably 2024, but really 2025, 2026 for the heavy kind of lift on the construction. I think most of the Hickman impacts would be 2026, where they'd be starting with the bridges over the interstate in 24 and 25. So those would be kind of the years that we're looking at. And so we have the grade separated crossing here from east to west. And then we've been going back and forth a little bit, and it was maybe kind of a little bit hard to see on the screen, but this is would be the crossing underneath Hickman Road. We've gone back and forth between east of the interstate, west of the interstate, looking at where water mains are at. Des Moines Waterworks has a high pressure water main that goes out to the LP Moon station on the north side of Hickman. So we're kind of working around that. Groundwater considerations of doing an underground tunnel under Hickman. At this present time, we're now have kind of gone back to the west side of the interstate, depending on what might need to happen with the drainage ditch that runs along Loves there to the north and east of their site, whether the DOT may need to acquire that as a part of their interchange project. It might afford us an opportunity to also have the trail as it be associated with that right of way. So that is also included in here where we're at this time. And then proceeding to, and then we did show kind of the alternative option that we were looking at to the east. We do have some concerns with some groundwater levels that we may have in that tunnel. There's been some analysis done, again, and not an exact science, but there is some concerns there of how we could do. We would do one or the other. We wouldn't do both, is what we're proposing to you at this time. And so we're kind of leaning a little bit more towards the western route underneath Hickman Road.
Now, when you looked at that Love's entrance to the left, that work, is that actual work being done in the entrance where you see the light gray concrete into Love's and Menards?
Yes.
And is that going to be then participation by those two property owners to improve that?
That part hasn't been determined. I know that they're not looking at this time, at least they haven't shared that they would be looking to the cities for that. I think the DOT is looking at picking up that cost.
Oh.
I can't confirm that, though. They haven't brought anything up to us about that specific area, but they are planning to do some rework there of the intersection, as well as the intersection at 111th on the east side, and they're incorporating that into their interchange cost. So just to give you kind of a sense of scale, the interchange cost that we're looking at here, 60 to 70 million for the complete reconstruction and the expansion of the bridges. So yeah, anything you see in that kind of grayish area would be work that would be done related to the roadway interchange. And then you can see the trail and kind of the off the main roadway.
Be fantastic to get access, trail access back there, but.
Over at the land there, I mean, acquisition of land, walk us through that piece right there.
So that is one of the open questions that we have right now. Part of what the Snyder and the DOT, so Snyder is also contracted with DOT to do the design of the interchange. And so that's why we paired this corridor planning up with it. So this ditch that you see here, I'm kind of trying to follow with my cursor. There's actually one ditch and a second ditch that exists there. The one ditch is mainly the water that comes from Urbandale from the north along Loves and then down into the creek. And then there's another ditch here that's actually in the DOT right away. Because of this ramp, so this ramp C that actually is bowing out a little bit more than the current on ramp, the DOT is going to have to be putting in some retaining walls here alongside that. And so one thing they're trying to figure out is the grade coming off that retaining wall. Is that going to get to a point where they might have to combine those ditches together, have it as a part of their right-of-way acquisition? That presents an opportunity a couple different ways from a stormwater management purpose of remediating that ditch. If the DOT's taking it over as a part of their right-of-way, right now that's on Love's property, and then incorporating a trail alongside it. So those are some things that we're trying to, they're still wrestling with, so we're still in the planning part of that, but that was the thought process of how we could run that to the south. And as you get further south, one of the challenges that we have is there's the water, the separator that sits at the bottom of Love's, this big detention basin. Basically, it's that oil water separator for the things that are coming off the parking lot. We don't really want to mess with that. There's going to be some needs for improvements there, we feel, at some point. That's why you see the trail kind of working its way to the east to try to avoid that. Or it connects with the main Greenbelt trail spine to the south. So that's where we're at on the pedestrian side of things.
The access that we already own is just too busy
Access.
between Love's and Menards.
Yeah, the challenge, they did show a version of that there. We kind of have a pretty narrow corridor through there to fit a trail and a road. And so we didn't think that would be also the safest trail experience coming from that intersection. So our, future look, if Love's were ever to redevelop someday, the ideal scenario would be is if you had a redevelopment site there that had an incorporation of a number of different types of, it's a pretty large site, you would probably run the trail through the site down to the Greenbelt versus around the sides. So we feel like this could be a good kind of almost temporary situation for a trail connection, hopefully finding a better route through the site at some point in the future. Then as I need to change my format here.
Susan, you got a question while he's pulling up the slide?
Sorry.
I do. One of the conversations we've had over the years, and this picture doesn't go far enough to the south to give an indication of what it would look like, but is the potential opportunity to have 118th Street go on through to Hickman. And so I'm just wondering, with the proposal for the trail to go where it is, how that would play with that if we were to look at making that happen. Expanding that road to the north is the only way we're ever going to be able to see any more commercial development. Push a little bit north from where it is. Like, well, it goes back to those Stanbro buildings. And there had been we used to have traffic try to go through the neighborhood, and then that entrance got closed off except for fire. But there was just a thought that if we had an opportunity for redevelopment of Love's, that having that road go on through would be valuable. So I just like to make sure we're thinking big picture of that whole area and not just from Hickman to the creek.
Where would that line up on this map? Would it be the entrance to Love's?
You would,
Or to the right? Or?
a little bit imperfect science, but you'd try to line it up with the intersection. So you'd want to, it would be, you'd have to have a lot of conversation of where you'd want to cross through the Greenbelt with that.
Right.
But I think if you were ultimately trying to do that, you're going to want to try to line it up with the intersection. So it would go further west of where the trail access comes down. Essentially kind of following that service road that we have in between right there. I don't know the grades off the top of my head, but you would want to try to work it west to get to that intersection how you could. You'd be kind of crossing a little angular over the Greenbelt from where 118th kind of lines up today, because you have a pretty significant grade drop from there down to the Greenbelt. And then it's kind of a slower grade as you come up here from the trail and the creek to kind of Menards and Love's area. So you definitely would have a grade change to work through to push anything through. If you were having a major redevelopment there and there was the need for that secondary access. One other thing to keep in mind too, for a secondary access if a Love's site were ever to redevelop, is actually going under the interstate over to 114th Street too.
Right.
Is also another potential for the Love's portion of it. That doesn't solve anything on the south side of the creek, depending on the intensity. Of course, we've seen some proposals for some of the parcels over there, one being a senior living facility that we've seen, which wouldn't necessarily push us to the point where you would need to have another egress to the north. But if it was an intense commercial multi-story office building, for example, yeah, then we'd have to really think through what that additional ingress egress would need to be for kind of more peak traffic. If you have more spread out traffic, like a senior living facility, there wasn't as much concern from the staff level that you would be able to manage that with the existing infrastructure, but a more intensive commercial use than you're getting into is, can the roadway infrastructure handle it that's there today on the south side, the 118th side.
There's your first economic vitality group committee. hurdle.
Now, we got a lot more to come before that one.
Redevelop.
How do we just punch that through? That's what I'm.
Here, I'll reorientate this here. So also, what's been a big conversation, I know we talked about this with the council at strategic planning when we kind of initiated this conversation, was how do we make this interchange feel a little bit more like a destination, a place of recognition for the two communities, going above kind of the standard DOT cross section for an interchange. And where we're at this point is what you see on the screen here on this slide and the next one. In terms of looking at one thing the two cities, the staff's talked a lot about is how can we match up with some of the orientation to Walnut Creek, some of the materiality that we have in both of our brands as communities. That's why you see a little bit more of that stacked stone, incorporating, the Walnut Creek look into the landscaping. I felt the landscape architect with Snyder did a nice job of coming up with this. Of course, this is a diverging diamond interchange that they're proposing. So it presents some bigger gaps in between the travel lanes that you see here than a traditional interchange. So we have the opportunity with incorporating some lighting and public art kind of columns in the bulbs, if you will, as you have the weaving that happens with the diverging diamond interchange. And we're looking at a feature underneath the bridges themselves that wouldn't necessarily be landscaping, because of course it'd be harder to maintain those underneath the bridges, but really trying to incorporate the brand both on the landscaping and looking at form liners and some of the retaining walls. Again, how can we incorporate and make this interchange look different than the standard interchanges that we see along the Beltway? And at this point, I think we're on a good track. Again, it's one of those things that we also talk about beyond just the capital costs associated with these kinds of improvements, is integrating with stormwater management. I think there's a lot of intentionality where you see stormwater retention happening within these gaps that we have within the roadways. There's of course going to be a landscaping, a maintenance need that the DOT is only going to do a limited amount. That's going to require the communities to look at a more enhanced level of that landscape maintenance. That's something the two cities have been talking about quite a bit, knowing that there's going to be some responsibilities that we're going to have to work together on if we go to this additional kind of enhanced level for the gateway approach. And we really focused on the Hickman traffic more than anything, knowing that that's more of our community residents that are going to be traveling on the Hickman Road through this interchange. So whereas it is through the whole interchange, but we're really focused on that experience on Hickman Road for this. And this also shows some other aspects to how we can incorporate the brands through, whether it's form lining in terms of the retaining walls, other aspects where we have tunnels going underneath the interstate or under Hickman Road, kind of keeping a theme throughout the design and aesthetic of the gateway features. And we're still working through some of the stormwater pieces because some of these things then drive, okay, where can we do stormwater management? Of course, as the council is aware, the DOT doesn't typically participate in stormwater management. They're not required to by their policies with the DNR. That is a conversation point that is brought up regularly in our discussions. What we're also trying to do is be realistic with some of those improvements of, can we do some better management practices in terms of stormwater that also fit within the purview of the DOT's maintenance, looking at grass trenching with rock trenches at the base, and some of these ditches that have degraded over the years that, again, the DOT could still maintain on their normal practices. So we're trying to strike that balance because we also know that that's going to be a maintenance item that we're going to have to work through, and the DOT is only going to do so much in that area. But we're continuing to advocate for that at the state level and with our delegation of, we really feel, the DOT has the largest storm sewer system in our mind and the largest impervious amount of pavement in the entire state, that it really is should be an obligation of the DOT to help maintain stormwater off of those roads. So at this point in time, we work with what we can and to try to continue that conversation, but that's where we're at this point. One last thing that I wanted to bring up, Urbandale's also had some conversations on this, and I know they're supportive of where we're at this point and what we've been showing to our federal delegation in terms of funding. But one more local issue that I wanted to talk about with the council on this item, and I'll jump back here to one of our other exhibits, is the frontage road at 111th. So I know we've talked about that particular area a number of times over the years. And I'll get to the one that shows it the best. Here we go. So as we've discussed, and Snyder actually brought this up as whether or not, as a part of this interchange project where this whole intersection is going to be getting reconstructed, what does the city of Clive want to do about the frontage road connection that we have right here that's really close to Hickman Road? So this is a tough one. This is one we've discussed before. It's not an ideal scenario to have that frontage road that close to the intersection. Of course, cutting it off means, okay, how are you getting heavier truck traffic out to a traffic signal? Ideally, you'd want to probably put a traffic signal in at 108th, which is to the east of here. That lines up with where the post office substation is. But it would mean there's be a lot of impacts. I don't want to pretend like we have all the answers to what it could look like, but this is it. What I want to get a feel from the council is, I know this has been a challenging area and can get kind of confusing when you have people on the frontage road trying to get into the left turn lane, and it can muck up the traffic a little bit right there. Is the council interested in us really digging in on what it may take to clean this up? Of course, you've got commercial businesses in that area that already probably see cut through traffic that are trying to get to 111th to go south because of the median that we have where the frontage road connection comes out. There isn't easy answers here, but I thought it was prudent for us to at least bring it up for conversation, because if we're going to be tearing up this entire area as a part of the interchange project, if we were going to really do something, I think now is that with that interchange project is the time to do it. Again, we need to do some further study, but before we invested a ton of staff time in that, I just wanted to get a little bit of a read from the council on that particular item. I know we've discussed over the years in terms of what we do there.
Let's reach out to our remote colleagues. Ted?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any harm in looking into it further. Obviously, that whole, intersection's a mess. So if there's something we can do to alleviate that, it can be very confusing to people, especially if you're not used to that location. So I would certainly be open to it. I mean, I don't know what that looks like at the end of the day, but.
Thanks, Ted. Shrikant?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's any harm in taking a look and seeing what our potential options are. I do wonder, do we maybe set like some sort of limits on how long we spend, so that way we're not spinning our wheels too long if inspiration doesn't hit, I guess.
All right, thanks. Those of you at the table, objections to looking at it?
I think that's wise to, options are always good. I don't want to get engrossed in this too much. We've got a lot of other big projects ahead of us right here, but I'm fine with looking at options on this. There's a lot of considerations. It's a complicated intersection I read in there. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on it though.
Well, I'd like to encourage that we not only look at the frontage road, but also some of the congestion that flows out onto 111th from the Starbucks back up. So I'd like to actually expand it beyond frontage road to looking at the whole picture there.
Good. Michael?
My first question will be, when you ask for feedback, I will want to hear what these business owners have said about the same thing, right? How it impacts them directly prior to if I cut through that area or not, which I do. So, and because of how it's designed, but what are the business owners, what would they want to see?
And Your Honor, I think our intent would be is with this direction is we would add this to the list of items that I know you all will look at here in about 2 months and see where it falls. But we want to be able to scope it in maybe just a little bit more before you are making those prioritization decisions at your strategic planning in August. But this gives us good direction on that.
Very good.
Any other questions on concerns with where we're at? Again, there's going to be a more formal presentation that Snyder is on the hook for to come back to you all and the Urbandale Council with kind of the full package. Hopefully we'll have some more answers to some of the outstanding questions, but there's more to come. But we want to just kind of, again, gauge the temperature of the council, where we're at. We know we're looking at some big price tags and some of these things, but also you only get one chance at doing this. This will be a 50, 60, 70 year improvement here. So.
Very good.
Looks really good. Those diverging diamonds. I don't know if I'm the only one here that some of those are so confusing. I just have to hit the gas and pray that I get through. I mean, they're just all windy and,
Well,
but it will,
I'm sure we'll have good signage.
right. But it will be a major improvement.
Yes.
Well, moving on from that, our next,
Hold on, I did have one thing,
oh,
John.
Ted, yes, sorry.
I was waiting for Mike to stop chiming in there. So Matt, on the gateway architecture and the forms and things of that nature, have we talked about, considered, or are we looking at incorporating the limestone that we have on 86th Street, or I don't know if it's limestone or sandstone or whatever that material that we use on 86th Street is, in order to try to tie it in so that we have some consistency there between this intersection and 86th Street.
Yeah, exactly to that point, Councilmember Weaver, this kind of stacked stone, I'm kind of putting my cursor around it. That was exactly something that we talked about, where we have a lot of on our signage, the little capstone with the stacked stone look is actually something that we're looking at. So we leaned a little bit more towards option 3, or this version of option 3, because it also matched up with some of the materiality that Urbandale has been incorporating in some of their signage. So that was definitely something that we brought up in terms of the color palette, looking at something that takes our brand and then it happened to match up well with Urbandale's brand into account.
Great.
I call it the Weaver stone.
Exactly. It's beautiful.
And what do we call the stone at the bridge on 86? Is that the McCoy stone?
If it's nicer than the Weaver stone, yes.
Okay, just a second.
And actually the pillars on 86 look very similar. So that bridge look very similar
They
to
do.
that stack stone look with the caps that we're showing here.
Yeah.
Very similar.
And I'm trying to remember right now what our monument sign looks like there at 111th and coming into this space as well.
That one is one of those, it's a precast panel that's
Right.
smoother.
Ah.
That's the one piece, then that has like the branding elements on it. So it's a little bit different, but it still has that same color palette of what we're looking at.
It'll need to have the McCoy lights on top.
Yes,
right?
sir. So we can change the LEDs. Yes.
Yeah. All right, hearing nothing further on Hickman, we'll move on to the final agenda item on 142nd. Brandon.
Thank you, Mayor. Staff was tasked with looking into a couple items along the northwest 142nd corridor, including the speed limit and trail crossing, a request for a pedestrian crossing by the city of Waukee at Southeast Timberline Drive added another item to that list. So staff is recommending the following changes to the 142nd Street corridor from University Avenue to Hickman Road. The first recommendation is to reduce the speed limit from 40 mile per hour to 35 mile per hour from University on the south to Hickman on the north. The current 40 mph is an acceptable speed limit for this section of roadway. However, based on the following factors, staff is recommending the reduction from 40 miles an hour to 35 miles an hour. The first is to match other Clive north-south arterial streets, as most are 35 mph for consistency. The second is Northwest 142nd Street, north of Hickman, has a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit in Urbandale. This would match that speed limit for consistency along this corridor as well. And then third, it would make this residential corridor more inviting for pedestrians and other modes of travel, especially with the trail crossing we'll discuss here shortly. We've also discussed this with the city of Waukee, who supports this change to 35 miles an hour as well. The second recommendation is to install a rectangular rapid flashing beacon to the Lakeview Drive Trail crossing location. An RRFB is a pedestrian actuated enhancement used with a pedestrian crossing to improve safety at uncontrolled marked crosswalks. This intersection meets most, if not all, of the criteria typically used for installation. Lakeview Drive is a logical location for an RRFB as the Clive Greenbelt Trail crosses at that location. With this being an uncontrolled crossing, the RRFB would enhance safety by improving yield rates to a higher volume pedestrian / cyclist crossing. These would be installed by city staff at a cost of approximately $15,000, although since I received the quote in April, they sent out saying there is a 15% increase on materials. As
Will
with
it be
every,
installed on both sides, use the east side or?
both sides.
Okay, so
both
you can
sides.
access it, the public could access on.
On
both
east
sides.
side, and then it would activate both signs to flash.
Should
at
be
the same time.
coordinated, yeah.
Yep.
together.
Is there an option to have a, pedestrian actuated actual like signal where the vehicles have to stop so it is safer?
That is an option. That's something we did not look into. I'm trying to think, some of what I looked into mentioned that these have similar yield rates as some of those more intense, more costly pedestrian crossing. But we could look into that further if that would be of interest.
Brandon, with
I mean-
that, would you have to do a further traffic analysis in terms of actually stopping the flow of traffic?
Yeah, that'd be a lot more in depth of a look into adding one of those signals stopping traffic. You're correct.
Sorry, council member, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, actually, that's exactly what I was going to ask is, does that require us to do a review on how that affects traffic and if it's going to cause a backlog on the vehicle side?
So yeah, that is an option, but everything that we looked at and common recommendations lead with the amount of traffic, the amount of pedestrians crossing. The RRFB fits that profile for this crossing.
And how heavily is that used for a pedestrian crossing? Do we have those numbers?
We have
Estimate, right?
an estimate that is close to actually the lower end. It's close to the lower end of adding a signal to cross, but due to this being a trail crossing, we felt that even being at the lower end of the pedestrians crossing, we felt it'd be a good location to install this.
So an entry level for an RRFB type of application.
Yes, an RRFB.
Okay, so it sounds like going to a full signal stop like situation would be overkill for sure.
Yes.
Well, I would suggest that the reason why those numbers are so low is because it is a difficult crossing. And if we had, better technology there, those numbers would increase. I actually like where you're going with that, Shrikant. I'm not saying we should go there right now. We don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good, right? So, but I do think it's something we should look at in the future if we see, we put in this kind of intermediate step, but study that, look at the numbers, and maybe it does warrant it at some point down the road, because I do like that as an option.
Brandon, to that point, would we be able to have data on how often this is being activated? So for example, if we know, okay, we have an estimate of here's how many trail crossings we think are happening today, that's in an unprotected situation, and then we could estimate that, you know, the number of times it's activated with a counter, we can get a sense, okay, is that matching up with?
I'd have to look into that. I do know we have the ability to add trail counters specifically to that location, but actually
how many times
it's activated, because I'm sure some people won't activate it if they're crossing at a time. They don't see a vehicle coming. So I could look into that, as well as possibly adding a trail counter for a period of time to see how many people are crossing. And then maybe, that's just something I have to look further into and see.
It might be just interesting to compare that, the activation amounts versus the counter amounts, to see how many unprotected or protected crossing, if the council was supportive of implementing this type of practice.
Michael?
Yeah, well, I think it's a great start, right? I can give Susan credit. She's been asking for something like this for 5 years or more in this same spot. And it's interesting now, today, it meets all the criteria, where for the last few years, it hasn't met the criteria. It's not an indictment of you. It's just time. And a guesstimate of walkers, when we have the ability to do the tracking of the counters, I'd like to see those. I would have liked to see them tonight, right? Those numbers to back up what we should do, because I with Susan and Shrikant and Ted, believe it should probably warrant a full stop at that location, which would increase the traffic, pedestrian traffic. But without those numbers, now, I guess we could reuse this unit that costs, thousands of dollars to put up. It's like Ted said, don't let perfect, get in the way of good. And that's what we're doing. But data really pushes this, and we should have had the data over the years of those numbers and counters. So I'd like to see those counters getting put up soon.
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah.
If I could just quickly, a couple.
Come up.
Just a quick gut feeling. If it barely meets the minimum for the RFP, it's probably going to be a long ways from the warrants for a full stop, just based on the way that works. The other thing is, we know that at some point in the future, we're going to have to consider urbanization of this whole corridor. That may be a good time to consider that, if we have to do more upgrades at that point too.
I agree. I'd argue that we don't know if it's at the bottom of the RFP right now. We're guessing that it is, because we haven't done counters at the trail, which would have given us the data to say if it is. I would argue that I'd guess that intersection warrants in the middle of an RFP, and there's no way to say otherwise, right?
Not arguing that portion of it. I just know that the range is large enough that it would have to be a big difference to go from the bottom to the top, I believe.
We don't know
and
where
therefore
at
the
the
numbers.
bottom is my argument.
Okay.
No,
fair enough. I'm not, I just.
Okay.
Well, and the other point is that this is part of our Greenbelt Trail. We always talk about our Greenbelt Trail. I go on this part all the time, and I know it's anecdotal, but I see lots of parents walking their kids, in strollers and little kids on bikes, and crossing this area is it's dangerous. And again, like Mike said, to Susan's credit for pushing this, I 100% agree. So, again, maybe it's not the right solution for today, but it is definitely something I think we should be looking at for the future.
I'd just like to say I'm really pleased that you're incorporating the recommendation to reduce the speed to 35 miles an hour too, because although it's not real evident from the photo in the lower right there, there's not a lot of distance between where the trail comes across and southbound traffic coming from the north, and there's a hill there. So there's not a lot of opportunity to visualize that need to stop or, slow down for people. And I could definitely picture some rear ending happening. Very happy about the intent to try to protect pedestrians, but we could create some crashes along there without the traffic slowing down. So it's going to take continuing to pay attention to what's happening there.
And I think
wonder
some
if we have
enforcement too. that will
sign
go along
in
with that.
advance of pedestrian crossing ahead or something like that.
I mean, that's required for these kinds of installations. And I think, as you saw with the kind of the speed study that was done, that the comfort level is a little over 40. Moving it down to 35 will definitely take early on some enforcement action. Because there will be some change management that will need to happen along this corridor to get folks to adjust their speed along this corridor. And I know the lieutenant over there is probably shaking his head. And that's going to need to go in tandem with the speed limit change. And we would do that. We've done that in other arterials where we've changed speed limits similar to what we did in Alice's Road a few years back, or it was last year, I believe. We'll need to couple that with some enforcement. So be sure for those that live in this neighborhood, as we change the speed limit sign, that we'll be out there enforcing that 35 mile an hour.
Friendly reminder.
Friendly reminder.
Brandon, you've got a few more slides for us. Oh, Ted?
Actually, sorry, I have one additional
Recon?
question. Yeah, so with that crossing ahead sign that that Mayor and Council Member Judkins were just talking about or mentioned, I agree that hill is kind of dangerous. Will there be some sort of lighting on that crosswalk ahead or something that lets drivers know when it's been activated or makes it more readily apparent?
We don't currently have that in the recommendation. There is currently enough site distance technically at this location based on common design standards, even at 40 miles per hour. So we did not look into adding, you do see those in other places where a light activates in advance of the crossing, but we did not look into that due to there being sufficient site distance based on current design standards.
And I'm guessing that's more expensive to do that sort of sign.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't see any examples of that as we were looking through. That would maybe, I'd have to look into what that would take to add that to be activated at the same time, how much additional cost that would be to add that.
Other questions? Oh, if you approach the podium, please identify yourself for the record.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see some of you again. My name is Donald Doudna. And when I moved into your fine city, I really appreciate how responsive all of you are and the way you listen to citizens. I was working with Mayor Scott on this issue, and I brought, quite a few people with me that live in the neighborhood. They may have some comments also, but clearly since the last safety or traffic count was done, the traffic speed and danger has gone up dramatically as people went back to offices, as well as with the great amount of building going on in the area. We do really have an opportunity to redirect some traffic, change behavior, slow down and prevent accidents. We also are going to have to enforce it, as already been brought up. As you're thinking about this, I have a couple of other ideas. Certainly sight lines are a problem on the whole road. And we have some education work to do. Anecdotally, I was walking my bicycle across that crosswalk yesterday. In the middle of one traffic lane, somebody coming north, rather than slowing down, sped up and honked at me. I know a lot of people do not know that crosswalks and failure to yield on a crosswalk have some pretty stiff fines, but I believe that you'll find that that crosswalk is used a great deal. It's very dangerous, and I think it's a good risk management to do this as rapidly as you can. Clearly, 128th Street and 156th Street are 4-lane. There are stop signs and stop lights on those streets. I think what's happened is people have figured out we can really speed on this, particularly as they get close to university or as they come off of university going north. Been a lot of accidents, as you probably have seen. One of the recommendations I would look at is when you're going to the west on university, there's a green arrow now that will throw traffic onto 142nd going north. It is creating a lot of problems during the 2 or 3 rush hours that we have a day. Traffic backs up. People cannot get out into the street because people are either running that stoplight or they're using the green arrow and they don't slow down. So it's presented another traffic issue that didn't exist 2 years ago, I think, as the traffic is mounted. We've also seen for enforcement, more semi trucks taking that particular route for the same reason. They don't have to stop. They don't have to, they just don't pay attention to the signage that's up there. So I think there'll be a signage and an enforcement area. Unfortunately, recently, we've also seen that some people are not stopping for the stop arm on school buses. And because most of my friends live pretty close, we see a lot of what goes on the street. And of course, that needs to, I assume that most of the school buses have cameras, and I don't know whether they've ticketed, but anyway, we're hopeful that you will take this action. My friends and I recommend it highly. I'm glad that you're doing it, and I appreciate all of you for serving in the public capacity you do. Having been on numerous boards, it's not an easy job that you have to do.
Thank you. Brandon, do you want to continue with your slides?
Yeah, so the third recommendation was brought to us by the city of Waukee. They approached us about installing a pedestrian crossing at Southeast Timberline Drive, which is half in Waukee and half in Clive. The closest pedestrian crossing east-west at this location to get to is approximately 2,500 feet to the south at University Avenue. Therefore, the city of Clive staff agrees with the city of Waukee that this location is a good candidate for a pedestrian crossing. The costs currently, how we've talked, would be shared with the city of Waukee. We're estimating it at an approximate total of $30,000. So our portion would be close to $15,000. Based on current estimates, the city of Waukee intends to include this crossing in a project of theirs that has not been let yet, so an exact cost is not known at this time. This crossing would be a standard pedestrian crossing. It wouldn't include an RRFB like the Lakeview Drive crossing that we're proposing now, because at this time it's not believed that this there'd be enough pedestrian traffic to warrant that additional need. So basically that's kind of how I'll conclude that. We're just looking for direction from council on how council would like to proceed with these 3 items. And if we'd like to move forward with any of the 3 items, we can start acquiring the equipment and starting ordinance readings for the speed limit change. So with that, I'll leave it open to any additional questions on any of the items discussed.
Well, thank you. Again, we'll start remotely. Ted, are you in support of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% support this.
Thanks. Shrikant?
Yeah, again, 100% agree. I just, some of the things that we talked about, the counters, getting some real data, I think that's important, as Councilmember McCoy mentioned. And then also, if it's possible to add that advanced warning, I think that'd be helpful as well.
Okay. Michael?
I'm fully agreed with everything everyone said. I do wonder, like on this one, are we opening up something that we know could need one of those lights? And should we be proactive or not on bringing a light on that one? But I'd have to look at that area. I think it's one of those areas that if you build it, they'll come to it, right? So we can say that we don't see the pedestrians coming to this when it doesn't warrant it, but once you put that walkway through, everybody's going to that one, right? Because they don't want to go to university and try that.
So kind of what you mentioned with the Lakeview, we would try to evaluate that and see if there is that pedestrian use to then warrant to put those up.
Yeah, use some counters.
And I think you've got, especially with this intersection at Timberline, you are going to have a lot less usage just because it's really about 20, 30 homes that you're serving versus a trail connection.
Right.
So it's going to be kind of an apples and oranges comparison. And I think if there is a desire there, I would, with our partners with Waukee, kind of put it on them to define that, get the data, and I think come with the case at some point in the future if it's warranted.
Very good. Susan?
I agree with what's been said. It'll probably primarily be to the benefit of the Waukee residents here. So I'm glad they're taking the lead.
Eric?
Yeah, I'm fine with all this. I think, it's well needed. And I do like the incremental approach where we have the opportunity to upgrade this based on data and metrics that we have. And I agree that, this is mainly serving those Waukee residents right there. So if they want to enhance this, then they should be able to help support that in a greater role right there.
Well, very good. I think you've got your marching orders, Brandon. It seems like the council is supportive of proceeding with this and a few suggestions along the way.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I make one more comment?
Yes.
I think that there will be plenty of people that would be interested in helping on this project and other similar projects. I talked to Jane Fogg, and I've learned about the Clive Community Foundation. You really have an excellent opportunity for raising money. I think the mayor knows I volunteered to donate at least $3,000 just to get that crosswalk put in. But I think there are many of our citizens that don't know about the Community Foundation, and the Community Foundation could be used as a very good tool as you're developing the canoe trail and some of the other things, but you can put components in that make it much more pleasant for walking and riding a bicycle. So I just encourage that. I volunteered to help with the Community Foundation, and it's moving slowly, but I think it could move quicker. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Your Honor, one thing I did want to point out on this too, a next step that we want to take is make sure we're informing the HOAs that exist on both sides of the street of our intent to do this improvement, just so they're not surprised by it. And they also have their own communication means to spread the word in the neighborhood. So I've asked staff, pending on your direction tonight, to also do that, reach out. We're going to need some time to acquire the equipment anyway, so it gives us an opportunity to, spread that word to those HOAs on both sides. I'll have your-
Very good.
Thanks.
Well, we thank you and your neighbors for coming tonight. Is there anyone else here who needs or feels the need to express views, or have we heard them now? Seeing no one rising, I assume you're all happy, so we'll leave it at that. Thank you all for being here. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is reports. And Pete, we'll start on your end.
Thank you, Your Honors. Out on Clark Street, sod installation has started, but we are far from complete. Weather has not worked in our favor, especially in the cells where cells are doing what they're supposed to do. When we get these consistent rains, they're catching that water, and it's keeping conditions on slopes and in the bottom of them a little wet. So we'll keep pressing, and we continue to thank the residents for their understanding and patience, but we know that needs to be a limit. And as a staff earlier this week, we spoke about how we're going to keep putting the pedal down to get this to a much more stabilized spot. Plantings, though, in the cells will not come until later on this fall. And because of when the sod's going in, we've got a big commitment we're making to watering along with the trees that have already been planted. But it's got to be done. 86th Street Railroad intersection. So congratulations to everybody who was working on that. They have made tremendous progress. We spoke earlier today as staff about are we on a timeline to open up the intersection again here by the time we get into the weekend. And I'm nervous about saying yes, absolutely, but it looks like late Friday, early Saturday as planned. And what we're committing to right now is at the very soonest possible time that intersection can safely be opened. We're going to make sure we get that communication out there and get it opened up. So it looks like Friday, Saturday scenario, maybe first thing Saturday morning, and then take advantage of some of the earned media we can get, putting that information out for the weekend broadcasts.
And we might have a singular lane closure here and there to paint lines and put signage up, but we want to get it open and we can manage just a single lane on either side. If to do that, I think it's more important just to get it open as soon as we can.
Doesn't seem like it's been all that bad around there. I mean, it's a nuisance, but needed.
Just imagine if you live off of Harbach and that was closed as well.
No, I know. That's one of my cut throughs as well. And it's closed. A lot of my cut throughs are getting closed, but
One more lift of asphalt to go.
Yep. One more to go.
yeah. I see that the trains though were going freaking same day. They had their
Yeah.
tracks laid and doing double time. But
Yeah.
we knew that was gonna happen. The concrete came late.
Yeah, they're their own level of government, railroads. So 120 residents plus 120 plus residents signed up for the soil quality restoration cost share program. We sort of informally set a date of last week on Friday for folks to get their application materials in so that we could get out and do spot checks on yards on Monday and Tuesday. So I worked closely with Polk County and their staff to go out and visit all of those residences that we think we're going to be able to fit. And on preliminary calculations, we are looking at almost 1 million square feet of turf. Now, will our grant take us that far? Probably not, but will it still take us a long ways? Can we still get to that goal of 100? Depends on how big the yards are that we'd be working with. So some of that is out of our control, but all of that aside, this has been a tremendous response from the community to doing the right thing when it comes to water, to doing the right thing to be good stewards and get a beautiful lawn as well. So I'm very happy with the engagements that I was able to have. Very happy also that many of you have decided that this is a good thing that you want to represent to your neighbors as well as the right way to do good turf management and good stewardship in Clive. So more to come in the next month on the contract process and picking our preferred provider who will be working with us in the fall to do the applications. The update on the biannual resident survey, we've had 494 responses from the randomly selected households, plus an additional 40 for folks who did it online through the open participation period, so 534 total. That puts us at a 4% margin of error, which is well within our range. That keeps us on target for getting data and results the first week of July, and plenty of time then for us to incorporate what we're hearing from residents into strategic planning in August and any number of other initiatives coming on in the future. Finally, you may recall from last summer, we worked with the students at Indian Hills Junior High to create stormwater mural, Keep Clive Clean murals. Last year, I was working with our friends in the Parks Department and especially the Public Works Department to kind of get that up and off the ground. I ended up doing a lot of the painting with residents who were interested. It's a time-consuming process, so I didn't get around to as many of them. We had some people left on the waiting list. Fortunately, this summer, I have got a team of scouts, one who is working on his Eagle Scout badge, who said that he would like to take this on. And they have got started today. I actually went out and painted with them a practice mural, and they got 2 more done today in the Porter Shelter area. They're going to be focused on areas coming into the Greenbelt through the month of June. But in the July newsletter, we're going to promote the opportunity for residents and businesses again. And they're interested in going on through the summer to keep painting as weather allows. So I'm confident this year we're going to get a bunch of them out there on the street and do a lot more positive storytelling about good stewardship in Clive.
Thank you, Pete. Yes,
Pete,
go ahead,
Could you
Michael.
give us a recap on the Harbach project and some of that stormwater projects that our neighbors could sign up for and where we're at with that?
Sure. So Harbach obviously is underway, and our engagement with the neighborhood through this process, Jim has been leading that with the engineering department, has been really about the closures, the mail, all those simple things that go, well, complicated things that go into a street reconstruction. When we did the broad communications about the SQR opportunity, we had about 3 residents who lived in that sub watershed that were considering a sort of special place for Harbach who signed up. Those folks, I'm going to have a separate conversation with, saying it's not a cost share for you because we need as a city to meet our requirements. We'd like to talk about a full pay there. And now that we're past that initial recruiting period too, I feel confident now going back to the Harbach list and saying, let's now bring up this unique opportunity for you. I just didn't want to confuse those folks any more than maybe we already had with the big program for everybody in the city versus the more unique program that they have access to. But our focus is still going to be on soil quality restoration and trees because they're a little more evergreen and the maintenance of them for the residents is a lot lower than a rain garden, though we're going to talk about rain gardens for the appropriate folks as well. The two big players who have a lot of real estate in that special area are Glacier Properties and School District. And we've spoken with both of them about their interest in using some of their area there. But we're not interested in just sort of meeting the base level that we need for Harbach reconstruction phase 1. We have so many needs in that neighborhood that if we can go big and still keep it under the number that it would cost to do good infrastructure for Harbach with SQRs and trees and other practices and build up a little bit of a reserve, we're going to do it.
The school is underway now, right? That we talked about, the reconstruction of that school and tearing everything out. Did they commit to this in advance? I mean, this is the time for them to commit to doing something right in that area.
Yep.
Have they committed to it?
We presented the opportunity and their engineers decided, their team decided they wanted to take a narrower scope to meet their requirements for the improvements they're making. But
when you say the engineers did, that's you're kind of giving a free pass to the school board because the school board could have done the right thing. And they're the ones that make the decision on that, not the engineers.
And so when they went through the approval process, their engineers were there, but also the leadership from their school principal and their operations staff with the school district. I can't speak to all the reasons they decided to do what they did, but I do, when I was just for my own representing what I did encourage them to think about a lot of other practices they could use, some that would better complement what we could have done on other parts of their property to meet some of the city's requirements as well. So it was not the last opportunity we'll have to keep doing some good education and teaching to the school district. What I'm really proud of with my colleagues is that they worked thoughtfully and patiently with the school district, presenting opportunities, I think, for them to kind of try something different as opposed to the path that they've taken, which is to put a lot of their capacity buried underneath this new concrete they're putting in for their parking.
That's disappointing.
So for the broader neighborhood, I know they're still interested. They did get wind that Rachel Conrad got that great new opportunity and they were concerned that this meant maybe that the program wasn't going to happen, but we'll affirm with all of them that, nope, we're definitely interested in working with all of you and happy to talk about what's going to be the best practice for their lawn.
Anything else, Pete?
No, Your Honor.
Recon.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of quick comments. I was able to view or tour the 5 public safety building, the new one, when I met for my orientation with Chief Benma. And I just want to say kudos again to everybody involved in that, city staff and everyone. There was a lot of thought that went into that building, and you can tell, especially with, for example, a lot of the stormwater management practices that we're talking about, you can see those right there. And I think that's fantastic. And then the other thing I just want to mention is kudos again to Parks and Public Works team members after the storm recently, earlier this week with, removing all the tree debris and some of the damage that was done.
Very good.
Thank you.
Ted.
Just one thing tonight, Icon Water Trails. We did get the federal government approval to split up the project into 3 separate discrete projects as opposed to one, while still being allowed to use the $25 million build grant. So that is proceeding forward, and the hope is to have that first one bid and ready to go hopefully here this fall. So we'll see. I have my next board meeting next week, and we'll get an update on that. But we did get that approval from the federal government. So that's it.
Thanks, Ted. Eric.
Yes, as many of you are aware, Catch Des Moines has worked with Ironman to bring in the Ironman to Des Moines this weekend. Last year was a half Ironman. The Ironman is an international event, bringing people in from all over this country and all over the world. The economic impact to Des Moines is about $8 million. So tremendous return on investment. And Ironman, what it is, it's a 2.4-mile swim, followed up by a 112-mile bike ride, followed up by running a 26-mile marathon. So you're really getting elite athletes that are coming in here. There's also amateur stuff as well and fun runs, but these are really the best to be able to do this. So in addition, they really like Des Moines, and we've signed a 3-year extension on this. So look around to see this for the next several years, next 3 years as well. So it's a great event for Des Moines.
Sounds good. Thanks, Eric. Anything else? Well, I'll use that as a segue because Battle of the Burbs is going to be on August the 6th, and it's a natural tie-in with supporting the Clive Community Foundation and sign up and be part of the Clive team. So just wanted to mention that since that was mentioned earlier this evening.
Mayor, I think that the last day to get the early bird pricing is Friday.
Friday.
If you want to.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, Friday, yes.
Well, thanks for pointing that out, Pete. So don't delay. I've got little slips if anyone needs one. So be sure to do that. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the Metro mayors met at the public safety facility last evening, and Chief Rowe helped give the tour to the fire side, and Matt gave a tour to the police side, and everyone was very impressed, just as Srikant was, about the facility, the fact that it came in under budget, on time, and is a great working facility. So I just wanted to mention and thank both Rick and Matt for staying around late to give those tours. They were much appreciated. So a wonderful evening, very impressive. Susan.
You may recall that I volunteered to represent Clive on the Polk County Homeless Coordinating Council and serve as vice chair. And one of the things that group has taken on over the past year is a look at how to work with the homeless to ensure good opportunities during extreme weather events, whether cold or hot. And there is a grant that's been received and a study that's underway this summer through Drake University to evaluate some of the opportunities for that. And one of the reasons I wanted to get involved is I just looking ahead, think that we have the potential for some Clive residents to start to be priced out of housing options and suburb, not just Clive, other suburbs too. It's tended to be seen as a Des Moines problem, but it is something that I think the suburbs need to be paying attention to. And as we look to make improvements in the 86th Street area, we have the potential for gentrification to happen. And that's some of our best opportunity for providing reasonably priced housing right now. So I just thought it would be worth bringing up tonight that we're engaged in that and need to be paying attention to it moving forward. And I will be participating in the bus tour that the Polk County Housing Trust Fund is having coming up on June 17th.
Good, thank you, Susan. And Matt or Lieutenant, I don't know if you're going to comment, but our police department is regularly involved with homeless individuals and taking care of them. So it is not something that doesn't occur in Clive. Michael?
Ted Weaver texted me to say I've said enough tonight, so I do not have a report.
Would you make a note of that, Matthew?
I need to speak up more often with that.
Council, anything to add? Matt?
Just a couple things tonight. First, just for those of you who haven't weighed in yet on some potential for some future partnerships or work with the Horizon Center next year. Please share your feedback on that. I know a few of you have already. I'll mention that again in my report to you tomorrow. I would really like that feedback so we can give staff direction on how to proceed there. And then lastly, just want to appreciate your support and our continued work together and serving as your city manager. I know the last couple of years have been some challenging ones as we've navigated how to operate in a pandemic and with inflationary costs and other challenges we're facing right now. contractor availability for capital improvements. We've got a lot of challenges before us, but I'm excited to have your support to help lead this organization through those challenges and advise you on the best path forward on a lot of these items, and look forward to strategic planning coming up in August, and we can see what the future is for Clive. So appreciate your support. Just wanted to mention that, Your Honor.
Thank you. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, correspondence, nothing?
Nothing further.
We'll adjourn at 8:04.